Hey everyone! Tonight, we're going to peel back the silk curtain of family dinners and polite smiles and take a look at what happens when love turns into entitlement. When the people you raised, the ones you trusted most, reveal teeth beneath their smiles. You probably wouldn't survive this if it happened to you. I barely did. So before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I'm doing here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're tuning in from. What time is it where you are right now? Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some soft background noise, and let's begin tonight's journey. The crystal chandelier above the grand ballroom shimmered like icicles catching firelight, casting delicate ripples across the marble floor. My home, the house my late husband and I built with quiet, stubborn work, never failed to look magnificent when it was all dressed up like this. But tonight, beneath the glitter, something ugly simmered beneath the surface. My daughter Amelia insisted on throwing herself an extravagant birthday party for her 35th. She said it was a celebration befitting her future, as if she hadn't already taken more than her share of what I'd worked for. I stood quietly by the dessert table, the air sweet with vanilla and champagne, watching her twirl beneath the approving gaze of her friends and business associates. Their sleek suits and designer gowns sparkled under the lights. Their compliments floated through the air, all syrup and subtle greed. My heart twisted. She was still my daughter, but I barely recognized her anymore. Since Amelia married Marcus, that polished, sharp-eyed real estate developer, her ambition had grown sharp edges. Ambition wasn't new to her, but Marcus gave it teeth. As the evening wore on, she approached me all swaying hips and brittle smiles, holding a sleek leather folder in one manicured hand. "Mother?" She purred far too loudly for our proximity, her voice dripping with performative affection. "Everyone's here. It's the perfect time to make it official, don't you think?" I blinked at the folder. Heads turned toward us. The soft hum of conversation shifted a subtle pause, like prey sensing a predator. "You've talked about transferring the house for months," she continued, her smile tightening at the edges. "Let's sign it." I felt my fingers curl tighter around the delicate stem of my champagne flute. My pulse hummed in my ears, louder than the orchestra in the corner. "Amelia, this isn't the time or the place," I replied quietly, fighting to keep my voice calm, my spine steady. Her smile slipped, replaced by a thin, cold line. "You always say that, Mother. But let's be honest, you're not getting any younger. Marcus says it's best to handle these things while you're still capable." The jab was deliberate, subtle cutting wrapped in silk. The room hushed further. Phones hovered. The chandelier's crystals caught the flash of a dozen lenses. I felt my cheeks heat, but my voice stayed steady. "We can discuss this another day." Her nostrils flared. The silence thickened like fog rolling in. And then Marcus appeared at her side, his hand settling on her shoulder like a polished threat in an expensive suit. And then it happened. Amelia, my daughter, my own flesh and blood, reached for the towering birthday cake at the center of the dessert table. 3 tiers of fondant, delicate sugar roses, all handcrafted by the most expensive bakery in the city. In one violent, humiliating motion, she shoved the entire cake straight into my face. The crowd gasped. Phones clicked. Someone stifled a laugh. "You selfish old woman!" Amelia's voice sliced through the shocked murmurs like broken glass. "This house should already be mine!" Frosting dripped down my chin. Cold, sticky sugar clung to my blouse, my hair, my dignity as I stood there blinking through the mess, through the shame. The chandelier's light fractured across the marble floor, catching the cruel glint in her eyes. The house. Always the house. Never the years I spent holding this family together after Robert, my husband, passed. Never the sacrifices, never the quiet dignity I maintained while they built their lives on the foundation I provided. I wiped my face slowly with the linen napkin as gracefully as if I were adjusting my lipstick. And then I spoke, calm as still water, steady as stone. "You will inherit it," I said, my voice soft but sharp enough to cut when the time is right. Amelia's lip curled. "And when would that be?" "When you finally drop dead. When you're too senile to know where you are." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder again, a signal I recognized. But Amelia, caught in her own venom, shrugged him off. "You don't even use this place," she hissed. "You barely leave your study. You live like a ghost already." The words should have cut. Maybe a few years ago they would have. But now I just felt tired. Not weak, not broken, just tired of the charade. Tired of the games wrapped in fake smiles and backhanded compliments. I straightened, smoothed my blouse, and fixed my gaze on my daughter. "Amelia," I said softly, but each syllable landed like a stone dropping into still water. "If you truly believe you're entitled to something that does not yet belong to you, you'll get exactly what you deserve." I turned, then my heels clicking against the marble floor, echoing down the grand hall. As I walked away from the ballroom full of whispers and wide eyes, the portraits lining the walls watched me pass. Their solemn painted faces, my late husband's eyes among them, steady knowing. They had no idea who they were playing with. Not yet. The door to my study closed behind me with a soft click, sealing me in with the silence, with the truth. And I smiled. The door to my study clicked shut behind me, sealing off the noise, the brittle laughter, the whispers, the judgment curling through the grand hall like smoke. For a moment, I stood there, my back pressed to the polished oak, listening to the faint hum of the chandelier lights and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. The frosting still clung to my cheeks, cold and sticky, like the residue of betrayal. I could hear the muffled thrum of music seeping under the door. The party was still alive, still breathing, as if nothing had happened, as if my daughter hadn't just tried to publicly humiliate me into surrendering everything I've spent my life building. I exhaled, steadying my breath, and crossed the room to the mirror above the fireplace. The reflection that stared back wasn't new to me, but tonight, under the faint lamplight, it looked sharper. The streaks of frosting on my face, the faint smudge of mascara beneath my eyes, the fine lines around my mouth etched a little deeper from years of holding my tongue. I wiped my face carefully with a cool cloth, avoiding my own eyes as long as I could. But eventually I looked. Evelyn Hawthorne, widow, matriarch, alone. How did we end up here? My gaze drifted to the old family portraits lining the wall. There was Amelia, still a teenager in that photograph, clad in her riding gear, her father's proud hand resting on her shoulder, his eyes bright with pride. She had always been Robert's favorite, his precious little girl. I never minded back then. She was sweet, grateful, eager to impress. But that girl, that version of her, disappeared after she married Marcus. I never trusted him. I saw it the first time he stepped foot into this house. The way his eyes roamed, lingering on the crown, molding the marble floors, the antique grandfather clock. How his compliments about Amelia were quickly replaced with questions quietly phrased, always circling back to property assets, bank accounts. Robert used to joke that Marcus had ambition. I knew better. He had calculation. And now his calculation had infected my daughter. The kettle whistled, piercing the quiet. I moved through the study, pouring myself a cup of chamomile tea, the same ritual I've performed for decades. The faint scent of lemon balm and honey curled into the room. I needed the calm. Sinking into my favorite armchair by the window, I stared at the portraits a while longer. My husband's eyes stared back at me from his old photograph. Steady, protective. "What would you do, Robert?" I whispered into the quiet. "What would you say to her?" But no answer came. Only the steady ticking of the clock and the faint echoes of clinking glasses from the other side of the house. They thought they could corner me tonight, that they could humiliate me into handing over my life's work with a birthday cake and a smirk. That I would crumble. They didn't know me at all. I took a slow sip of tea, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue like a quiet reminder. "No, Evelyn, you are not broken. You are not done. Not yet." The morning sunlight drifted through the wide windows of the sunroom, casting golden streaks across the floor. The birds outside chirped, oblivious to the storm brewing behind these walls. I had barely finished brewing a second cup of tea when I heard the soft knock at the back door. There she was. Amelia. She stood in the doorway, carefully composed. A soft pink blouse, minimal makeup, no jewelry. Her honey blonde hair pulled loosely back to frame her face, the image of the gentle, remorseful daughter. I knew better. "Mother," she began, her voice practiced and low. "Can we talk?" I motioned toward the wicker chair across from me, saying nothing. 2 cups sat on the table, steam curling from the porcelain. I had expected this. She settled into the chair, crossing her legs delicately, her posture rehearsed. A pause hung between us, like a curtain waiting to be drawn. Then the performance began. "I wanted to apologize for last night," she said, her eyes glassy, her voice trembling just enough. "It got out of hand. I didn't mean for it to go that far." I sipped my tea, saying nothing. She fidgeted under my silence like a child caught with sticky fingers in a broken jar. "You have to understand," she continued, her voice dipping into that soft, syrupy manipulation I recognized too well. "We're just worried about you, about your health, about how overwhelming managing everything must be." There it was, the setup. "You've been so strong for so long," she added, reaching across the table for my hand. "But maybe it's time to let someone help. You shouldn't have to carry this burden alone anymore." Her husband's words from the party echoed in my mind. "You're not getting any younger." I let her take my hand, though it took every ounce of restraint not to pull away. "And what kind of help did you have in mind?" I asked, keeping my tone even, my eyes fixed on hers. She smiled, the same tight, patronizing smile she always used when she thought she was being clever. "Marcus and I have been speaking with a few people, financial advisors, estate planners. We could manage things for you. Take the stress off your shoulders. Handle the paperwork. The property." There it was, the real reason she came. I leaned back slightly, still holding my tea. "The property?" I repeated. "Yes," she said quickly, sensing hesitation and rushing to patch it. "We're not trying to take anything from you. We just want to secure it. For the family. For the future." I smiled softly, the kind of smile I'd practiced for decades. That was very thoughtful of her. She looked relieved, convinced I was bending. I set my cup down gently. "I've managed this house for over 40 years, dear," I replied, my voice steady. "I think I can manage it a little longer." Her smile faltered just for a second. Her fingers tightened around the cup. "Mother, we're just thinking long term. Marcus, he knows people. We could simplify everything for you." I tilted my head slightly, feigning consideration. "You're very concerned about me, Amelia. I appreciate that." She blinked, uncertain now, unsure of where this was going. "Why don't we talk more about it soon?" I offered lightly, rising from my seat. "But not today. I think I need some fresh air." The conversation was over. For now. But the battle had only just begun. It was barely noon when I heard them. I had stepped quietly down the hall, intending only to retrieve a book from the small library off the main floor. The house, for all its grandness, creaked in the right places, old wood settling the faint hum of air through the vents. It had always made me feel safe, like the house itself was alive, keeping watch. But today, that familiar creak carried a different kind of warning. The door to the downstairs office, the one Robert used for years to track every bill and contract, sat cracked open. I wasn't supposed to be home, or so they thought. Amelia and Marcus's voices drifted down the hall, low-hushed, but sharp enough to slice through the quiet. "We need to move faster," Amelia whispered, her tone tight with frustration. "She's more stubborn than I expected." Marcus's voice followed, cold and clipped. "That's why we need Dr. Lang involved. If we can get her declared mentally unfit, it's over. No need for her signature. No more stalling. It'll be clean." My pulse quickened, but my body stayed perfectly still, like the house itself holding its breath. "And he's willing?" Amelia asked, her voice quieter now, but not enough to escape the acoustics of these old halls. "Of course he is," Marcus chuckled darkly. "We've been donating to his clinic for 2 years. He'll write whatever assessment we need." A pause, a faint shuffling of papers. "The sooner we get the deed, the sooner we sell." Marcus continued, his voice slick with satisfaction. "With this market, we could clear $2 million by year's end. Wipe out my debts completely." Amelia's voice dropped lower, almost hesitant. "And Mother won't have to worry about anything anymore. Once she's declared incompetent, the court assigns us full control. We can put her in that place in Charleston. It's nice. She'll be comfortable." The audacity, the absolute arrogance of it. I gripped the edge of the bookshelf, my knuckles whitening, but I didn't make a sound. Not yet. Not until I had more. Marcus's voice turned colder. We need the paperwork ready before she changes her mind again. And keep her thinking we're on her side. Don't spook her. She still thinks I care, Amelia muttered. That one cut deeper than all the rest. I backed away from this door, my steps deliberate, careful not to let the floor groan beneath me. The weight of the betrayal pressed into my chest like a stone, but my hands didn't tremble. Not anymore. They wanted to declare me unfit, my own daughter. For years, I'd convinced myself Amelia's selfishness was a phase and immaturity she'd eventually outgrow. That her sharp edges would soften with time, that the coldness creeping into her voice was just adulthood hardening her. But this wasn't immaturity. This was calculated betrayal. I slipped quietly back to my study, the old oak door closing behind me with a soft click. The sanctuary of the room wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, muffling the faint sounds of the house beyond. My hands shook not from fear, but from the rush of clarity flooding through me. They'd made a mistake, a fatal one. They still thought I was the fragile old woman who needed protecting, the one whose world began and ended with tea parties and garden clubs. They didn't know me. Not really. Robert did. And if he were here, I could practically hear him whispering from the framed photograph above the fireplace. Don't show them your fear, Evelyn. Show them your patience. The next morning, I woke with a singular purpose. Rage was a luxury I couldn't afford. I needed strategy. I needed allies. I reached for the old rotary phone on my nightstand, its cool receiver familiar in my palm. My fingers hovered for a moment, tracing the worn numbers before I dialed. It had been months since I called Martha. Not because we'd grown apart, but because we understood each other. Some friendships don't require constant upkeep. They simply exist. Solid, steady, like the stone foundation of this house. Her voice answered on the second ring, warm and sharp as ever. Evelyn. My word, it's been too long. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Martha, dear, do you have time for a private chat? Her tone shifted instantly, sharpening like a blade being drawn. Of course. Are you all right? Not quite, I admitted. I could use your counsel. Where shall we meet? Not here, I said quietly, glancing toward the hallway, half expecting Amelia to appear with another folder of paperwork. Too many ears in this house. Martha didn't hesitate. The cafe near St. Augustine's, noon. I'll be there. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived, save for two elderly men playing chess in the corner and a young woman reading by the window. I chose a table tucked near the back, away from prying eyes. Within minutes, Martha appeared, composed, elegant, her tailored gray coat and pearl earrings understated, but her eyes sharp, watchful. The kind of eyes that missed nothing. She sat across from me, folding her hands neatly on the table. Tell me everything. I didn't hold back. The birthday party, the humiliation, the visit in the sunroom. But most of all, the conversation I'd overheard in the hallway. Martha listened without interruption, her lips pressed into a thin line as I recounted every word, every threat disguised as concern. By the time I finished, her expression was cold measured, the courtroom side of her fully awake. They're not playing games anymore, I said softly. They're trying to erase me. She nodded once, and fast. If they're already talking to a doctor willing to sign off on an incompetency filing, you have very little time. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, grounding myself in the warmth. I need to move before they do. You need evidence, Martha said firmly. Solid, irrefutable proof that they're conspiring to strip you of your legal rights. Quietly, discreetly. The last thing you want is to tip them off too early. I met her gaze steady now. I was hoping you'd say that. A flicker of pride softened her eyes for the briefest second. You've always had a quiet strength, Evelyn. But this requires more than strength. It requires precision. I nodded once. I'm ready. Martha exhaled, already sliding into the calculated efficiency I'd seen her wield in courtrooms. You'll need someone discreet, a private investigator, someone who knows how to gather evidence without leaving a trail. A faint smile crept onto my face. I may know someone. Her lips curved into a matching smile. Good. She reached across the table, placing her hand over mine, the weight of her reassurance solid. Let's make sure they regret ever underestimating you. Outside, the first autumn leaves swirled in the wind. Inside, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Control. The man Martha recommended was as unassuming as they come. Mr. Callahan. No first name offered, which in hindsight only made me trust him more. We met 2 days later in the lobby of the old Warwick Hotel, a relic from the 1940s with worn velvet chairs and creaky brass elevators that always seemed a second from collapse. It was the kind of place no one looked too hard at anymore. Perfect for quiet business. I sat in the corner, sipping weak coffee from a chipped porcelain cup when he approached. Mid-50s, pressed khakis, salt and pepper hair, and a face so plain it slipped right out of memory the second you looked away. But his eyes didn't miss a thing. Mrs. Warner. His voice was low measured, like a man accustomed to staying just below the radar. I nodded, extending my hand. Mr. Callahan. He took the seat across from me, producing a slim leather notebook and a pen from his pocket. No flashy briefcase, no fancy gadgets, just the bare tools of a man who understood the power of observation. Martha gave me a brief rundown. He began flipping open the notebook. But I'd prefer to hear it directly from you. I told him everything. The birthday party humiliation, Amelia's forced sweetness, and Marcus's cold precision. The conversation I'd overheard in the office hallway, the plan to have me declared mentally unfit, the doctor in their pocket, the scheme to seize the house. As I spoke, Mr. Callahan jotted small, neat notes, his face unreadable. When I finished, he simply nodded. They're playing a dangerous game, he remarked, tapping his pen lightly against the page. But arrogance makes people sloppy. That'll be your advantage. A faint smile touched my lips. That's what I'm counting on. He pulled a small, nondescript device from his pocket, sleek black, no larger than a pack of gum. Voice recorder, he explained. Legal for personal use in this state. As long as you're part of the conversation, it holds up. I turned it over in my hand, marveling at how ordinary it looked. Yet this tiny thing could dismantle their entire plan. Record everything that feels off. Callahan instructed. If they mention the house, the doctor legal paperwork, anything that suggests coercion or manipulation, keep them talking. Stay calm. Let them believe you're still unsure. I slipped the recorder into my purse, feeling its small weight settle among my things. Somehow, it made the burden in my chest feel lighter. And Dr. Lang, I asked. I've started digging, Callahan assured me. His connections to your son-in-law run deeper than you'd expect. Donations, referrals, closed-door meetings. I'll find the paper trail. The faint clink of a spoon on a saucer echoed across the lobby. For a moment, neither of us spoke. You'll have to be patient, he warned finally. They'll push harder. They'll sense you hesitating and press their advantage. But the longer they believe they've got you cornered, the more they'll reveal. I've been patient my whole life, Mr. Callahan, I replied softly. I can manage a few more weeks. His mouth curved into a faint approving smile. Then let's get to work. I left that meeting with the recorder secured in my purse, my steps steady despite the storm brewing on the horizon. They thought I was vulnerable, that I'd crumble under the pressure. But what they didn't realize was that I'd been quietly rebuilding my foundation brick by brick while they laid their traps. The next few days were a masterclass in performance. Amelia and Marcus visited, often their rehearsed concern as polished as ever. Amelia brought pastries from that overpriced bakery downtown, fussed over my health, mentioned how confusing managing the estate must be getting. Marcus, ever the snake, in pressed slacks, gently circled the conversation back to protecting the family's future every chance he got. Each visit, I wore the face they expected. The weary widow overwhelmed by the complexities of legal documents and property deeds. I let my voice tremble ever so slightly. Fumbled with the tea kettle, misplaced a paper or two, and every word, every patronizing remark, every thinly veiled threat was captured neatly by the little recorder tucked behind the ceramic vase on the kitchen shelf. They grew bolder with each visit, mistaking my quiet for surrender. Mother Amelia cooed one afternoon, sitting primly on the edge of the sunroom chair. It's not just about the house, it's about simplifying your life. You deserve to enjoy your golden years free from all this stress. Marcus nodded, sliding a glossy folder across the table. Inside, more paperwork. Deed transfer forms, financial authorizations, neatly typed, no doubt, drawn up by the same lawyer they used for their own affairs. Just a few signatures, he added smoothly. And you'll never have to think about these things again. I lifted the folder, feigning uncertainty, my fingers trembling just enough to sell the act. It's all so much, I whispered. Your father always handled these things. Exactly, Amelia chimed in, her smile widening. And now it's our turn to help you. The recorder hummed silently beneath the vase. They thought they were winning. I let them. That evening, after they left, I retrieved the recordings and played them back, listening to their false kindness, their carefully chosen words. Callahan had been right. Arrogance makes people sloppy. By the end of the week, I had hours of recordings, a paper trail of manipulation, and a plan solidifying like mortar between bricks. The storm was building, and I wasn't afraid. I was ready. It wasn't long before their desperation sharpened. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped beneath the front door like an unwanted whisper. Heavy cardstock, my name written in Marcus's careful, angular handwriting. I stared at it for a long moment before sliding a letter opener beneath the flap. Inside, neatly stacked, was a full legal packet. Deed transfer authorization, power of attorney updates, financial custodianship forms. Every document carefully worded, perfectly typed, just missing one thing. My signature. I let the papers rest on the entryway table, their weight far heavier than their physical form suggested. It wasn't just ink and paper. It was their assumption, their entitlement, their belief that I was one trembling penstroke away from surrender. And at the bottom of each page, Amelia's signature already scrawled in her neat looping script. Marcus's too tidy and confident. They weren't even waiting for my agreement anymore. They were preparing for inevitability. I didn't call them. Not yet. Instead, I called Martha. Her voice was calm but tight when I explained. They've already signed for me. I told her, each word like a stone settling into place. That's forgery. She snapped, her lawyer's instinct overriding her usual measured tone. If they attempt to submit those documents without your consent, they'll claim I agreed, I interrupted, my voice steady. They'll paint me as overwhelmed, confused, grateful for their help. Martha exhaled slowly. I could hear her mind racing on the other end of the line. Good, she said finally. Let them keep pushing. The harder they press, the better it is for us. There was a pause. I could almost picture her pacing, her office glasses perched low on her nose, legal pad in hand. They're arrogant, Evelyn, she added, voice low and certain. That's what will break them. I hung up and carried the papers to my study, tucking them into the same drawer where Robert's journals lived. His neat handwriting, preserved across decades, whispered the same quiet warning. They think you're weak. Let them. That evening, I prepared the house. Every corner, every creaking floorboard, every familiar nook had served as a comfort for years. Now, it would serve as my fortress. I placed a second recorder in the sitting room, neatly hidden beneath the side table. Another near the front entryway, disguised among a small dish of keys and spare change. One last device settled behind the mantel clock in the dining room, its faint red light blinking to life. They wouldn't know it, but every word, every carefully crafted manipulation would be preserved. My defense wouldn't be panicked accusations, it would be undeniable proof. And then I waited. As expected, they didn't stay quiet long. 2 days later, Amelia arrived with a bottle of Pinot Noir and her best impression of a dutiful daughter. Her eyes gleamed with determination masked beneath concern. Mother, she began softly, helping herself to the armchair across from me. I know all of this is overwhelming, but we're only trying to help. I poured tea, my hands steady despite the storm beneath my ribs. I appreciate that, darling. She smiled, tight, practiced, rehearsed. She hesitated, toying with her bracelet. I worry. About you. About how much pressure you're under managing this estate. Her eyes flicked to the recorder beneath the table, though she had no idea it was there. Marcus and I spoke to Dr. Lang. She continued, her voice dipping into gentle manipulation. Just a wellness evaluation, nothing scary. He can help ease the court's concerns should anything unexpected arise. There it was, the first real chess move. I sipped my tea, unexpected. Well, she offered a weak chuckle. Accidents happen. Confusion sets in. It's better to be proactive, don't you think? The recorder captured every syllable, every drop of false concern. And if Dr. Lang finds me perfectly capable, I asked, meeting her gaze. A flicker of frustration passed across her face, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. That would be wonderful. Of course, she lied. The tea tasted bitter, but I swallowed it down, letting the warmth steady me. They thought I was dancing toward their trap eyes, wide heart frail. They had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead, the walls closing in, not around me, but around them. The meeting with Dr. Lang was scheduled for the following Monday. Amelia insisted on handling the details, booking the appointment under the guise of concern, but it didn't matter. By then, I'd already spoken to Mr. Green. He's no more a doctor than I'm a ballet dancer, Mr. Green had quipped dryly over the phone. Medical degree, yes. Integrity, not so much. The man had a history. Quiet settlements, dubious evaluations always favoring the highest bidder. A useful puppet for families looking to sideline inconvenient relatives. But this time they underestimated how inconvenient I could be. The morning of the appointment, I dressed deliberately. A pale blue silk blouse, tailored slacks, low heels, understated jewelry, polished, composed, nothing resembling the frail, bewildered matriarch they hoped to parade in front of him. I greeted Dr. Lang at the front door with a smile so steady it unnerved even me. Dr. Lang, I said warmly, shaking his hand. Please come in. His eyes darted briefly around the entryway, calculating. Probably picturing dollar signs floating above every antique vase and oil painting. Marcus and Amelia hovered in the sitting room, their postures strained with barely concealed anticipation. Mother Amelia said, stepping forward, "We just want to be sure everything's as it should be." "Of course," I replied, ushering them all inside. "I appreciate your concern." We sat together, the low hum of the grandfather clock filling the silence between questions. Dr. Lang's inquiries started benign enough: date, time, my birthday. Simple cognitive checks. I answered smoothly, my mind sharp as ever. But as the questions turned personal, I saw the cracks forming in his performance. "And how are you coping emotionally?" he asked, pen poised. "The loss of your husband, managing the estate. Does it feel overwhelming?" I tilted my head, giving him a small, measured smile. "Robert's been gone nearly 6 years, Doctor. I miss him naturally. But grief doesn't erase competence. If it did, I doubt half the CEOs in this country would be employed." He blinked, his pen pausing. Marcus shifted in his seat, his polished shoes tapping the hardwood impatiently. Dr. Lang cleared his throat, pressing on. "Have you ever found yourself forgetting things, misplacing items, losing track of finances?" Behind his professional veneer, I caught the slight twitch of unease. He was fishing, hoping I'd hand him the justification they paid for. I leaned forward slightly. "I misplaced my reading glasses last week," I admitted with a soft chuckle. "They were on my head." "But if that's grounds for incompetence, you may as well declare half the population unfit." Amelia's expression tightened. Marcus exhaled slowly, frustration simmering beneath his facade. The recorder, neatly tucked beneath the side table, caught it all. Dr. Lang wrapped the session quickly after that, offering polite platitudes and promising to review his notes. As he gathered his briefcase, I walked him to the door, my voice low. "Doctor," I said, pausing at the threshold, "I do hope your notes reflect the truth. It would be unfortunate if your reputation got tangled in something messier." His eyes narrowed, uncertainty flickering across his face. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm a professional." "Of course you are," I replied smoothly. "That's why I trust you'll act accordingly." The door clicked shut behind him. Amelia and Marcus stayed silent as I returned to the sitting room, their confidence flickering like a weak flame in the wind. "Tea," I offered, pouring myself a cup without waiting for an answer. They didn't know it yet, but their carefully constructed plan was already unraveling. They'd sent a snake into my home, but I'd greeted him with open arms and a sharpened stick behind my back. The game wasn't over, but their advantage, that was slipping away by the second. The report arrived 3 days later, a neat cream-colored envelope, the kind designed to feel official and authoritative. Amelia had practically tripped over herself delivering it, her expression hovering somewhere between smug and expectant. Dr. Lang sent his assessment, she announced, placing it on the entryway table like a trophy. I nodded, fingers brushing lightly over the sealed flap. Thank you, dear. She lingered, eyes scanning my face for cracks. Finding none, she turned on her heel and disappeared down the hallway. The moment I heard the front door click shut behind her, I opened the envelope. Inside was a brief, carefully worded evaluation. No declarations of incompetence. No glowing endorsement of my mental faculties either. It was a neutral stance designed to give them room to maneuver without exposing Dr. Lang to liability. He's more cautious than I thought, I murmured to myself, tracing the edge of the paper with my thumb. But caution wasn't enough to protect them. Not anymore. I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Green. Expected as much, he said after I read him the summary. Lang's reputation is shaky, but he's not stupid. He knows there's heat on Marcus right now. Good, I replied. Let's turn it up. For the next week, Mr. Green's team worked quietly, digging deeper into Marcus's finances, his associates, and most importantly, his desperation. It didn't take long to find the cracks. 2 failed property developments, a string of unpaid contractors, a quiet lawsuit brewing over misappropriated funds, and behind it all, the looming collapse of their carefully crafted image. By Friday, Mr. Green had compiled everything into a tidy, damning dossier. We met again in the same hotel lounge, tucked away in the corner booth, where the world couldn't eavesdrop. He slid the folder across the table. It's worse than I thought. I flipped it open, scanning pages of wire transfers, falsified documents, and whispered promises to creditors that Marcus couldn't possibly keep. They're circling him like sharks now, Mr. Green continued. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And when it happens, I said quietly, they'll look to me. My house, my assets, my name's still attached to their crumbling empire in ways they never thought I'd uncover. I closed the folder, my mind sharp with clarity. It's time. Mr. Green nodded. I've prepared everything for the trust transfer. Once it's filed, they lose any legal foothold. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the years pressing against me and falling away. They think I'm still playing checkers, I mused. Mr. Green's lips curved into a rare, faint smile. You're playing chess, and they're out of moves. We arranged the signing for the following week. Quiet, no fanfare, no announcements. In the meantime, I played my part with unwavering precision. Tea with Amelia. Smiles for Marcus. The gentle confusion of an aging mother leaning just a little too heavily on their guidance. They never saw it coming. The night before the trust filing, I stood in the library. Robert's old journals spread across the desk. His steady handwriting filled the pages, reminders of the man who'd seen through ambition and charm long before I was willing to. You warned me, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the crackling fireplace. But grief clouds judgment. And love makes fools of even the sharpest minds. Not anymore. I closed the journals, my reflection catching in the glass cabinet door. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch at the woman staring back. Steady, calm, dangerous in the quietest way possible. By this time tomorrow, my estate would be sealed behind ironclad legal protections. And Marcus and Amelia, they would finally understand exactly who they'd underestimated. The day of the trust transfer arrived like any other. Soft morning light filtered through the lace curtains of my study. The air smelled faintly of lavender from the candle I'd lit earlier. But beneath the ordinary, there was something electric simmering just beneath my skin. It wasn't nerves, it wasn't fear. It was the steady hum of control, something I hadn't truly felt in years. Martha arrived just after 10, as composed as ever in her slate gray suit, a neat leather folder tucked under one arm. Her presence filled the room with quiet reassurance. Ready? She asked, smoothing her sleeve as she took a seat beside me at the old oak desk. I nodded, my fingers lightly resting on the edge of the papers she laid out before me. More than ready. The notary arrived shortly after. A young woman with sharp eyes and an efficient manner, she wasted no time in reviewing the documents, each page meticulously prepared and double-checked. The Langley family irrevocable trust. It had a finality to it, a solidity that soothed the quiet ache that had lived in my chest for far too long. As I signed my name on the last page, I thought of Robert, of the nights we'd sat at this very desk, discussing retirement plans, investments, how to protect Amelia's future. Funny how protecting her had somehow turned into protecting myself from her. The notary affixed her seal crisp and undeniable. "It's official," she declared, gathering the completed documents into her folder. "Effective immediately." Martha gave me a small, approving nod. "They can knock. They can threaten. They can scheme. But they cannot touch what's been locked away." Relief settled over me like a warm blanket. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was the opening move. "They'll push harder now," I said quietly, watching the steam curl from my untouched cup of tea. "Let them," Martha replied. "Desperation makes people sloppy." And Marcus and Amelia, they were already cracking. Later that afternoon, Amelia stopped by unannounced. I found her standing in the foyer, feigning casualness, her arms crossed over her designer blouse, eyes darting across the entryway like a predator casing familiar territory. "Mother," she greeted, flashing that brittle smile. "Just thought I'd check in." "How thoughtful," I replied, guiding her toward the sunroom with practiced ease. We sat across from each other, the silence stretching long enough for discomfort to bloom behind her polished facade. Finally, she spoke. "I know things have been tense lately. I just want you to know Marcus and we only want what's best for you." I tilted my head, my expression as soft as linen. "Of course, dear." Her smile tightened. "And for the family, for the estate. I know you've been thinking about the house, the future." I sipped my tea, savoring the warmth. "I have." Hope flickered in her eyes, naive and eager. "Good, because with your signature, we can—" "I've already taken care of it," I interrupted gently. The words hung between us like fog. Amelia blinked, her mask faltering. What?" "The house. The estate. It's all been arranged," I said smoothly, setting my cup down with a delicate clink. "Everything's secured." Panic rippled across her features. "Mother, you didn't." "I did." My voice remained soft, but there was steel beneath it now. "Don't worry, dear. It's protected. From predators, poor decisions, and desperation." She stared, searching for weakness, for confusion. But I gave her nothing. Because for the first time in years, I had nothing left to lose and everything to reclaim. She rose stiffly, her facade cracking. "You've made a mistake." "No, darling," I whispered as she turned to leave. "I've finally stopped making them." As the front door clicked shut behind her, I allowed myself a small smile. The chessboard was set, and their king was already cornered. The following days unfolded with eerie stillness, like the heavy pause before a storm breaks. Outside, life carried on as usual. The mail arrived. The garden bloomed in its summer pride. The neighbors trimmed their hedges. But inside these walls, I could feel it. The tension coiling tighter. The unseen gears of their desperation grinding louder with every passing hour. They thought I didn't notice the sleek black car parked a few houses down for 2 hours yesterday, or the sudden flurry of calls from unknown numbers that never left voicemails. But I noticed. I noticed everything now. It was Martha who called it first. "They're regrouping," she'd said calmly over the phone, flipping through legal briefs as though she wasn't orchestrating the defense of my life. "They've realized brute force won't work. So now they'll come with softer hands, polished smiles. Expect tears." The tears came sooner than expected. 3 days after Amelia's last visit, Marcus showed up, not with legal threats, not with false concern, but with flowers. Roses pale pink, the kind I carried at my wedding. A clever choice, sentimental, disarming. "Mrs. Hawthorne," he greeted from my porch, voice low, expression, the perfect blend of humble and hopeful. "May I come in?" I studied him for a moment. His posture screamed salesman, but his eyes, those slick, calculating eyes, betrayed him. They weren't here to reconcile. They were here to recalculate. "Of course," I replied smoothly, stepping aside. He followed me into the parlor, setting the roses down on the entry table. The faintest sheen of sweat beaded along his temple. Desperation doesn't always look frantic, it often looks polished. Well-rehearsed, but I could smell it now. "Lovely place," he remarked, his gaze drifting over the crown moldings, the antique grandfather clock. "Amelia's always spoken so fondly of growing up here." I said nothing. "Let him talk. Let him spin his web. I know things have been tense," he continued, perching on the edge of the settee. "But we've been reflecting a lot on how we've handled things, on how we've—" approached you. I took my usual chair across from him, crossing one leg over the other, steady as marble. Go on? A flash of discomfort crossed his face. He hadn't expected this much composure. We want to make things right, he said earnestly. No more pressure, no more paperwork pushed under your nose. We just want peace. I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I tilted my head, feigning consideration. That's all I've ever wanted, Marcus. Good. He smiled relief, coating his voice like varnish over rotting wood. Because Amelia's worried about your health, about everything, and I promised her I'd check on you. Just man to man, he added with a self-deprecating chuckle. There it was, the manipulation dressed in charm. How thoughtful, I replied, rising from my chair. Come with me. His brow furrowed, but he followed as I led him down the hall, past Robert's study, to the conservatory at the back of the house. Sunlight poured through the glass ceiling, casting long shadows across the tiled floor. I gestured toward the old wooden desk tucked against the far wall. The Langley family irrevocable trust documents sat neatly atop its sealed notarized untouchable. Marcus's face drained of color as he read the bold heading. His bravado shattered. You see, Marcus? I began softly, my voice steady as stone polished smooth. I've made my peace. The estate is protected. The house is no longer a bargaining chip. And you're out of moves. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting across the papers, his mind scrambling for an exit strategy. You played a long game. I continued, stepping closer, but you underestimated your opponent. His mask faltered completely then. The salesman's grin collapsed, replaced by the raw, simmering resentment beneath. You think this is over? He hissed, his voice low, sharp as a blade. No, I whispered, my gaze unwavering. I think it's just beginning. And with that, I left him standing there, cornered by his own arrogance, the weight of his failure settling onto his shoulders like a storm cloud ready to break. The sun was barely cresting the horizon when my phone buzzed on the nightstand the next morning. I wasn't surprised. After Marcus's visit, I had expected them to scramble. Desperate people don't sleep well. The caller ID read Amelia. I let it ring twice before answering, keeping my voice soft groggy. Mother? Her tone trembled, raw, more cracks than words. Can we talk? A pause stretched between us. I could hear her breathing uneven on the other end of the line. I waited. Sometimes silence reveals more than questions ever could. I just... She faltered, and I could practically see her wiping at her eyes, rehearsing the next line. I didn't know Marcus came by yesterday. That wasn't my idea. I smiled faintly at the ceiling, the morning light tracing soft patterns across the plaster. Of course not, darling. It was a delicate balance now. Let her believe I still wobbled between suspicion and trust. Let her pour the concrete of her own downfall. Please, she whispered, the desperation creeping in. Can we meet? No lawyers, no paperwork. Just us. I let the silence linger another beat before replying. All right, this afternoon. The Rose Garden. The Rose Garden. The place where Robert used to walk with her as a child, plucking blooms for her hair, teaching her how to prune without drawing blood. If there was any sincerity left in her, it would show there, and if not, well, I had other plans. By midday, the garden basked in quiet, golden light, the heady scent of roses curling through the summer air. I sat on the old stone bench beneath the arbor willow at my feet, drowsy in the warmth. Amelia arrived precisely on time. She wore a simple cream blouse, her hair tucked into a loose braid, her makeup soft, almost childlike. A calculated image, but I knew her tells now the subtle tightening around her mouth, the faint sheen of fear in her eyes. She sat beside me carefully, folding her hands in her lap. It's not supposed to be like this, she began, her voice cracking, just enough to sound authentic. No, I agreed calmly. It wasn't. She turned toward me, her eyes glistening. I never wanted to fight you. I never wanted lawyers and police, and her voice wavered. I just wanted to protect what Dad built. That's all. The audacity of it twisted like a cold knot in my stomach, but I kept my expression unreadable. Marcus? He pushed me, she whispered, tears threatening to spill. The debts. The Ridgeview project. I didn't know how bad it was. I thought if we secured the house. Her voice broke, then the practiced facade cracking wide open. Or so she wanted me to believe. I studied her, the delicate lines of her face, the raw edges of panic clinging to her every word. For a fleeting second, I saw her at 17 again, laughing in the garden, braiding wildflowers into her hair, free from the rot of ambition. But that girl was gone, and the woman before me was still spinning a web. You were willing to declare me incompetent, Amelia, I said softly, letting the words settle like ash between us. She flinched, shame or perhaps fear flashing across her features. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was scared. Her voice cracked, real this time, or close enough to pass. Please, Mother. I don't want to lose you. We can fix this. I reached over, brushing her hand gently. Her fingers trembled beneath mine. We can, I agreed, my voice as smooth as silk. But not through deception, not through manipulation. She nodded quickly, her eyes wide, hopeful. I'll talk to Marcus. I'll tell him to stop. No more. No more pushing. No more lawyers. We'll work this out. Just please don't shut me out completely. I smiled faintly, patting her hand. Of course, darling. But inside, I was already 2 steps ahead. Because what Amelia didn't know, what Marcus didn't know, was that Martha and Mr. Green had already secured everything. The trust, the financial audits, the recordings, the legal filings. Their safety net was gone. All that remained now was the fall. As Amelia stood to leave, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, she glanced back at me one last time. I love you, Mother, she whispered. I held her gaze steady and unreadable. I know. And as she walked away, her shoulders tight with quiet dread, I exhaled slowly, the weight of the past months unraveling like threads in the breeze. The storm was nearly here, but I wasn't the one who needed shelter. The following morning, I awoke with that peculiar, unsettling calm that only comes when you know the worst is behind you, but the consequences still have to bloom. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels more like an audience holding its breath than peace. Downstairs, I made my tea the way Robert used to, strong, dark, no sugar. I wasn't in the mood for softness. Willow circled my ankles, purring, sensing the shift in me. The newspaper lay untouched on the counter, but I already knew the headlines would be irrelevant compared to what was coming. By noon, Martha called. They filed, she said simply, no need for pleasantries. Guardianship, full petition, emergency declaration of incompetency. They want control immediately. A small, bitter smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Right on schedule. Her voice remained steady, but I heard the simmer of satisfaction underneath. I've already contacted the judge. You'll be served formally within the hour. Let them believe they've won. For now. The timing was almost poetic. Barely an hour after the call ended, a courier appeared at the door. He was young, all nervous energy, an oversized suit jacket. Mrs. Hawthorne, he asked. I took the thick envelope from his hands, flipping it over with quiet curiosity. Thank you, dear. Try to stay out of this heat. He blinked, confused by my calm, but left without question. The contents were exactly as expected: formal notice of a pending guardianship hearing, their claims printed in neat, clinical language. Cognitive decline, financial mismanagement, inability to make sound decisions, vulnerability to undue influence. It read like a checklist for elderly incompetence, and buried within the attachments a signed statement from Dr. Alden himself. I let the papers fall onto the table, exhaling slowly. The audacity still managed to sting, even though I'd been bracing for this. Amelia's signature was there, too elegant and smooth, right beside Marcus's. Their united front as polished on paper as it had been in their smiles. But beneath it, desperation. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have anticipated, was that Mr. Green had already secured Alden's private records. The payments, The emails, the blatant conflict of interest, and the recordings, their voices, their schemes, their reckless confidence, all cataloged, ready to be unveiled. They were building their case on sand, and the tide was already coming in. That evening, Martha arrived with a bottle of good scotch and the sharp glint of victory in her eyes. "Tell me," I said as we settled into the study, the fire crackling softly. "What are the odds they survive this?" Martha poured 2 glasses, her movements graceful practiced. "Mathematically speaking, slim to none. Emotionally, they're already unraveling." She slid a new folder toward me, thicker than the last, heavy with printed emails, bank records, transcripts. At the top, a simple label, Anderson Estate Fraud and Abuse Evidence. "They tried to bury you," Martha continued, settling into the armchair across from me. "But they forgot you built the foundation." I sipped my scotch, letting the smoky warmth bloom across my tongue. Robert always said, "Never hand over the keys to your kingdom unless you're ready to never get them back." Martha smiled faintly. "Good man." We reviewed every document, every scrap of evidence, meticulously preparing for the hearing. It wasn't just about defending myself anymore. It was about exposing them entirely. The money trail, the manipulated doctor, the pre-signed deeds, their own words. By the time we finished, the clock chimed softly midnight. The house settled around me, no longer a cage, but a fortress. "They have no idea," I whispered to myself as I climbed the stairs to bed. "Not yet." And as I drifted to sleep, the looming date of the hearing circled my thoughts, not with dread, but with quiet, righteous anticipation. The reckoning was coming, and I was ready. The courthouse smelled faintly of lemon polish and anxiety. It had been years since I'd set foot in that building. The last time was when Robert and I finalized the paperwork for our estate plan. Back then, the halls seemed sterile but secure, the beige walls holding quiet confidence. Today, they felt like a stage. Martha walked beside me, her heels clicking a steady rhythm on the tile. Mr. Green trailed just behind, expression unreadable but eyes sharp, scanning every corner like a predator sizing up the terrain. Courtroom 3B, the room where everything would unfold. "Are you ready?" Martha asked softly as we paused by the doors. I adjusted my scarf, the silk cool against my throat. "I've been ready for months." Inside, Amelia and Marcus were already seated at the long, polished table, their attorney, some smug man in an expensive blue suit, hovering beside them. Amelia's hair was flawless, her expression composed, but her eyes flicked toward me with something colder than contempt. Fear, maybe, but not enough yet. Marcus, on the other hand, couldn't even meet my gaze. His focus stayed on the table, his jaw, tight fingers drumming anxiously against the wood. They hadn't expected me to show up so put together. The judge entered. A woman sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, her robe crisp, her presence commanding. The proceedings began quickly. Formalities, introductions, the filing of the guardianship petition. Their lawyer spoke first, his voice smooth as velvet. "Mrs. Hawthorne's declining cognitive function has been a growing concern. Her estate is complex, her health fragile. My clients, as her immediate family, only wish to protect her interests." I kept my face passive, every muscle disciplined. The judge nodded, flipping through the documents. "I see Dr. Alden's statement here, supporting claims of cognitive impairment." A flicker of triumph passed over Amelia's face. She thought it was over already. Then Martha stood. "Your Honor," she began, her voice the perfect balance of professionalism and quiet steel. "Before this court makes any assumptions regarding my client's capacity, we'd like to submit additional evidence for consideration." The judge gestured for her to proceed. Martha handed over a file, the real file, the one Mr. Green had so carefully assembled. Inside, the payment records, the emails between Marcus and Dr. Alden, the recorded conversations transcribed in meticulous detail. The judge's brows furrowed as she read. "Bribery of a medical professional," she repeated aloud, flipping the pages. "Attempts to manipulate a diagnosis for personal financial gain." The courtroom shifted. Amelia stiffened. Marcus went pale. Martha continued smoothly. "Further, Your Honor, my client has maintained full legal clarity. She voluntarily established an irrevocable trust for her estate outside the reach of these individuals. She has also documented through recordings and written records a clear, coherent awareness of the situation." The judge turned her gaze to me, sharp but curious. Mrs. Hawthorne, do you wish to speak? I rose slowly, letting the room absorb the moment. My daughter and her husband believe I'm weak. I began softly, my voice carrying across the quiet room. They've mistaken grief and patience for incompetence, but I assure you, Your Honor, I've spent my entire life protecting what my husband and I built. I'm not about to surrender it now, not to them, not to anyone. A heavy silence blanketed the room. Amelia opened her mouth, likely to object, but her lawyer placed a hand on her arm, warning her with a subtle shake of his head. The judge flipped through the evidence one last time, then exhaled. I've seen enough. The ruling came swiftly. The guardianship petition denied. A formal inquiry into financial manipulation and elder abuse opened immediately. As the judge adjourned, I caught the exact moment realization dawned on Amelia's face, that her carefully constructed house of lies was collapsing. And I walked out of that courtroom free. Not just from their schemes, but from years of quiet erosion. Outside, Martha placed a hand on my shoulder. It's done. No, I corrected gently. It's only just begun. Because now it was their turn to feel powerless. The headlines came faster than I expected. It started with a quiet article tucked away on a local news site, prominent real estate developer, under investigation for alleged elder exploitation. Just a few short paragraphs. No photos, no names. But by the end of the week, it was everywhere. Marcus's face plastered across digital news feeds, the glossy photos from old networking events now accompanying words like fraud conspiracy and financial abuse. Amelia's name wasn't far behind, though the articles painted her as the concerned daughter tangled in a complicated family dispute. But the court documents told the truth. And so did the recordings. Their empire, so carefully curated with cocktail parties and charity galas, was unraveling thread by thread. I watched it unfold from my living room, sipping tea, Willow curled on my lap like a little gray sentinel. The TV hummed, softly broadcasting their downfall. Mr. Green called that afternoon. Thought you'd like to know, he said, his voice carrying that same calm precision. The state's financial crimes unit just froze all of Marcus's business accounts. I let out a breath, steady and even. Good. He's cornered, Green continued. The lenders are circling, the partners are bailing. Ridgeview, dead in the water. A quiet satisfaction bloomed in my chest, but it wasn't the gloating kind. It was the peace of knowing the foundation they built on manipulation and greed was finally crumbling, and I never had to raise my voice to do it. That evening, as twilight deepened outside my windows, there was a knock at the door. Not loud, not forceful, just hesitant. Maria peeked into the sitting room. It's her, she whispered, her eyes narrowing. I rose, smoothing my sweater, and opened the front door. Amelia stood there, disheveled, pale, her eyes red-rimmed mascara smudged at the corners. Mother. Her voice cracked. I didn't speak. I only stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. We sat in the sunroom, the same room where she had once poured tea with false sweetness, layering her words with quiet manipulation. But tonight, she didn't bother with the performance. Tears slid down her cheeks. Her hands trembled as she gripped her mug. I lost everything, she whispered. The house, the business. Marcus, he's in custody, I finished gently. Yes, I know. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of it all. I never wanted it to go this far, she choked, but the words rang hollow even to her own ears. I studied her for a long, silent moment. I could see remnants of the little girl she used to be, the one Robert adored, the one who clung to my skirts after scraped knees. But layered over that was a cold, calculating woman, the one who saw me as a means to an end. You made your choices, I said softly, my words slow, deliberate. And now you're living with the consequences. Her chin quivered, but I didn't offer comfort. Not tonight. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. You didn't just hurt me, I replied. You tried to erase me. We sat in silence, the grandfather clock ticking steadily behind us. For the first time in months, I felt untouchable. Not just legally, but emotionally. Amelia's tears wouldn't sway me. Her regret, however real, wouldn't rewrite what she did. I rose, my tea untouched on the table. Go home, Amelia, I said quietly, if there's anything left. She stood, her shoulders slumped, and drifted toward the door. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't have to. As the door clicked softly behind her, I turned back to the window, watching the last light fade from the horizon. The house was safe. I was safe. And for the first time in years, I was finally entirely free. The days that followed settled into a strange, serene rhythm. The news cycle raged on Marcus's arrest, the investigation expanding whispers of other victims of bribes and offshore accounts. His once pristine image dissolved under the weight of evidence, the carefully polished mask cracked beyond repair. Amelia's face disappeared from public view. No more charity galas. No more magazine spreads featuring her poised on the grand staircase, bragging about her family legacy. That staircase, those photographs, this house, they were never hers to parade. And now everyone finally knew. I spent my mornings in the garden. The soil still clung to the early spring chill, but that never stopped me. I trimmed back the rose bushes, repotted the ferns along the sunroom windows, and restored the herb bed Robert had once tended with quiet devotion. It felt grounding. The house was quiet in a new way now. Not hollow, not anxious, just peaceful. The kind of peace that comes after the storm when the wreckage clears and the ground feels steady beneath your feet again. Maria stayed on, of course. She moved through the house with her usual quiet efficiency, though now her eyes carried a flicker of pride when they met mine. "You did it," she said one afternoon as we wiped down the kitchen counters. "They underestimated you." "They always have," I replied simply. Mr. Green kept me updated. Marcus's business partners flipped on him quickly, eager to save themselves. Bank accounts were seized, properties sold under court order. Amelia's assets, what little remained, locked in legal disputes. I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in watching them collapse, only a quiet, inevitable justice. The real victory was simpler. The house was mine. The gardens, the sunroom, the grand staircase, the library filled with Robert's journals, our family photographs tucked safely away, no longer props in someone else's performance. It was all exactly where it belonged. Late one evening, as the sky turned the color of ash and lavender, I found myself standing at the study window, Willow curled at my feet. The garden lanterns flickered to life along the stone path, casting oft halos of light onto the dewy grass. The doorbell rang. Maria, quick as always, peeked around the corner. "Shall I?" I nodded. "It's all right." She disappeared down the hall, returning moments later. "A letter, ma'am. It wasn't from the courts, not from a law firm, just a simple cream envelope. No return address." I opened it carefully, the paper smooth beneath my fingertips. Inside a single page, Amelia's handwriting. "Mother, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to believe I've changed. I don't even expect a response. But I wanted you to know. I'm sorry, not just for what we tried to do, but for forgetting who you are. For thinking you were someone I could manipulate. For thinking your love made you weak. I was wrong, and now I have to live with that. Take care of yourself, of the house, of the life you built. Amelia." I folded the letter, setting it gently on the side table. No tears came, no anger, just a quiet, steady acceptance. The house sighed softly as the wind stirred the curtains. The ticking clock filled the silence. I had nothing left to prove, no more battles to fight, no more illusions to maintain, just peace. I turned off the lights, the house settling into stillness. Willow patted behind me, her little paws whispering across the hardwood floors. Outside, the garden lights glowed. The gate stood tall. The house was quiet. And I, Evelyn Hawthorne, was finally fully home. The seasons turned, as they always do. Time, as it turns out, keeps its own promises even when people break theirs. By summer, the scandal had become yesterday's news. Marcus's face vanished from the business headlines, replaced by fresher dramas. Amelia retreated to some private villa out of state, licking her wounds in quiet exile. Occasionally, gossip trickled through the neighborhood, the odd whisper at the market, a hushed conversation at the cafe. But inside these walls, peace. At last. The house breathed differently now. It wasn't weighed down by the ghosts of false promises. It wasn't a stage for others to perform their ambitions. It was simply mine. I walked the halls in the morning's sunlight, stretching across the hardwood floors like golden ribbons. I opened the heavy library doors, the scent of old leather and faded paper greeting me like an old friend. Robert's journals still sat neatly on the shelves, preserved, respected, untouched by the taint of greed. Sometimes I'd read them again. His neat, meticulous handwriting still offering quiet wisdom. Even after all these years, he'd warned me once in those pages, told me ambition unchecked eats people alive. He'd seen it coming. I hadn't listened then, but I hear him now. Maria stayed on, of course. She tended to the house with gentle authority, her loyalty as steady as the sunrise. Sometimes over tea, we'd sit on the sunroom porch, watching the breeze ripple through the tall hedges. "Funny," she remarked one afternoon, stirring honey into her cup. "You always think the ones closest to you are your shelter. But sometimes," she shook her head, "sometimes they're the storm." I nodded, sipping my tea. "And sometimes you weather it." We smiled, saying nothing more. The quiet said enough. In the evenings, I walked the gardens. The rose bushes bloomed with stubborn brilliance. The stone path felt firm beneath my feet. I had my routines, the late-night tea, the old radio playing faint classical music, the little gray cat curled at my side. And the house? She stood as proud as ever. Tall windows gleaming. The grand staircase polished. The foundation steady, untouched, unshaken. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about reclamation. About proving quietly that love doesn't mean surrender. That age doesn't mean helplessness. That silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. Neighbors waved politely. The whispers faded, and in their place, respect. Sometimes I'd pass the portrait of Robert in the foyer. His eyes twinkled behind the glass, a quiet, knowing pride etched into his painted smile. I liked to think he'd be proud. Not just because I protected what we built, but because I remembered who I was. Evelyn Hawthorne, widow, matriarch, survivor. The final letter from Amelia arrived in autumn. No threats this time, no slick legal jargon or desperate pleas. Just a note, "I won't come back, Mom. I know that now. But I hope one day, when the house is quiet, you'll walk the gardens and think of me before all this. Before we forgot how to be family. I hope maybe you'll forgive me. Amelia." I set the letter down, folded neatly beside the others. No anger stirred. No bitterness. Only that familiar quiet acceptance. Forgiveness. Maybe in time. But trust, that was gone. I walked to the garden that evening. The sky bled lavender and gold as the sun dipped behind the trees. The house stood strong behind me. Willow padded along beside me, her green eyes bright in the twilight. The world outside carried on. The neighborhood quieted, and I finally stood still with no shadows at my back. The wind rustled the tall hedges. The lanterns along the stone path flickered to life. And for the first time in a long while, I was at peace. The house sleeps quietly now, its walls wrapped in shadows and the soft hum of the night. The world beyond the iron gates still turns. Somewhere people chase fortunes, grasp at power weave, careful lies beneath polished smiles. They rise, they fall, they forget. But not here, not anymore. Here, the quiet stretches long and steady. The old floors creak with familiar warmth. The garden hums beneath the moonlight, stubborn and alive. The heavy front door stands closed, not locked out of fear, but sealed with quiet strength. I sit by the window, tea cooling beside me, watching the night settle in. There's no rush now, no battles left to fight, no performances to endure. Only the house, the garden, the steady, faithful ticking of the old clock on the mantel. Time carries us all forward, whether we notice or not. Funny thing about storms, they roar, they tear, they shake the ground, but they pass. And when they do, if you've held steady, if you've known who you are beneath the noise, you're still standing. Older maybe, wiser certainly, but standing. So tonight, if you're listening to this in your own quiet room, maybe with the fan humming soft in the background, remember that the world can rattle your windows. It can try to take what's yours. But the quiet, the strength beneath it, that belongs to you. It always has. Now, let the lights fade, let the shadows stretch long, and sleep knowing you are steady and safe.